नमस्कार, सलाम, सत श्री अकाल एंड गुड इवनिंग। दोस्तों, मैं हूं समीर और एक बार फिर हाजिर हूं आपका चहीदा प्रोग्राम लेकर लॉस एंजलिस संगीत सेतु। I hope that all of you are staying safe. The coronavirus pandemic is no way over. In fact, the situation in the United States is getting quite worse. आप लोग सब safe रहिए, social distancing maintain कीजिए. Please wear your mask when you are in public or when you go out. तो चलिए आज का एपिसोड में जाते हैं. And in this episode we have जिसे हम कहते हैं रिदम का बादशाह, Bickram Ghosh, Pandit Bickram Ghosh will be joining us in this episode, and he is coming to us all the way from Kolkata, India. Namaskar, Pandit ji. It's an absolute honor and a privilege and a pleasure to have you on our show, Los Angeles Sangeet Setu. We really welcome you. How are you doing today?
Well, doing quite well under the circumstances. I mean, we're still relatively locked down, and but I've been going to studio. I've been working for a while now, so because my studio is very near to my house, so I have an advantage. But yes, otherwise, doing well, as I said, under the circumstances.
Sure, that's wonderful to know. Bikramji, the first question that I would like to ask you is that you are a world-renowned rhythm maker, right? Now, rhythm, of course, is all around us, right? In our surroundings, in our environment. We also have, rhythmic cycles in the cosmos. So I'm curious, how does those things influence you? Like, is that from where you draw your inspiration?
Well, I like to think of rhythm as both a microcosm and a macrocosm. The microcosm is the tiniest source of life, and which in us living beings is, or human beings especially, is the heartbeat or the pulse rate. And both are rhythmic terminologies: heartbeat, pulse rate. So that's the essence of life itself, and it is so important that without a heartbeat or without a pulse rate, you're not even alive. And if there's something amiss with the heartbeat or the rate, then you're not well. So that is the beginning point. And then if you throw it out into the cosmos, as you said, Indian rhythm is cyclic in nature, and everything around us is cyclic and in rhythmic cycles. So there's a 24-hour day, keeps rotating on and on. There are 12 months a year, keeps going on and on. 365 days a year, on and on. Even Halley's Comet comes every 75 years or so, and it all keeps going on in cycles. And if you think of it all, it's one big rhythm. So yes, I would say that while I may in the moment draw inspiration from a variety of things, but at the back of my head, it is always there that there is something really cosmic to rhythm, and it is so basic to human nature that I think is very empowering. And to draw your source from this sense of empowerment actually is a very it's a very humbling experience, because you realize that you are part of this enormous activity in the universe, which is rhythmic.
Absolutely, wonderfully said. Acha, Bikramji, you have experimented quite a bit with fusion music, and I have kind of little different sub-part questions on this. So my first question on that is like, what is your perspective of fusion music? Because there is no international genre called fusion music, and absolutely, like, some people would say use of Indian instruments on a Western genre. That is one view, but I would like to know, how do you view it?
See, when I started doing what people often call fusion music, I did not think that I wanted to do fusion music. I simply had a sound in my head. I had an idea of a certain sound, of a certain kind of setup, a musical setup, which would bring onto the table a certain kind of discipline, and which was a form which was kind of brewing in my head, that this too can be a form of music. And once I started doing that, so if we try and understand what that form itself was, then of course the form draws its initial and essential influence from Indian classical music, because that is what I have learned and what I was for many, many years, a pure Indian classical musician, before in my early 30s when I kind of started doing fusion music. So the whole idea was that there is a possibility out there with, let us look very specifically at my own tablas. I saw a possibility, especially frequency-wise, in terms of frequency, that could give the tabla a fresh perspective, just in terms of the sound that the tabla could be surrounded by or could be in perspective of. So I added on the HPD 15 hand sonic, which I was one of the early people who started working with this instrument, a Roland product, and I endorse it now. So this instrument I bought in, I think it was 99 or 2000, so a good 20 years back. And when I brought it back to India from Japan, I started thinking, how could I combine it with the tabla? Because there was an instinct inside me which said there was something I could do with this, you know. And then I chanced upon the SH-101 bass guitar tone on that instrument, which is a staccato bass guitar tone. So you hit it, it's a hand drum, so you hit it, and it gives this really nice low end, almost sub sound. And when I hit it, I really liked that frequency, and I realized that that frequency was not there, pretty much not there in Indian classical music. So I figured then this could be the form which, based on Indian classical music, would give some more frequencies, and hence maybe open up the genre to a fresh audience. To supplement that, to complement that, I brought in the low octave tabla, which I call the low sa tabla, and I've often called it the Carnatic tabla, because I've learned Carnatic percussion from Pandit S. Shekhar, my Guruji, for many years, and I wanted to use that information. So I brought the low sa tabla, which kind of sounds in between a pakhavaj and a mridangam. And I normally use the low sa with the hand-sonic HPD 15 SH-101 tone. That gave what I like to call a really deep nada, a very dense sound. And then the tabla and bayan are, of course, there. To that, I added some African traditions of body drumming, which then I was kind of dabbling in. I had a friend who was African who was giving me information. And all of this together today is the Bickram Ghosh kit, which is only used, mind you, in my so-called fusion shows.
अच्छा, अभी पंडित जी ने जिक्र किया about the unique way he plays his tabla and instrument. तो चलिए थोड़ा सा झलक सुनते हैं.
So the fusion is pretty much taking a central idea and combining it with compatible sounds or compatible ideas. As a genre, if you look at fusion music, and what I do, I like to call it Indian classical driven world fusion, world music, whatever you like to call it. It is basically centered around the kind of the nucleus of Indian classical music, and then you have a drum kit with it, which is not part of Indian classical music. You have a vocalist, which is a part of Indian classical music. Again, you have a mridangam or a ghatam, which is part of South Indian classical music, but not part of North Indian music. So these are influences which I brought into the setup and created rhythmscape, my band. And that eventually became very popular because a whole generation of youngsters started identifying with that sound. I think that's what happened, and that's the history of what I did. Now, the nomenclature is really beyond me because I realized that when the days of CDs, which is quite not so there anymore, but in that era, I used to see my work, my rhythmscape, etc., these albums sitting under world music. So you could also call it world music, or you could call it fusion music, what have you. But yes, it's so nascent that there isn't a proper name for it yet. And it's too broad, frankly.
Yeah, true. So, it's interesting you mentioned the hand sonic. So I'm not a percussion player at all, but I do own a hand sonic. And I had bought it only just because, in America, it's a difficulty to find good, tabla players and percussion players. I was experimenting with it on my recording, so I still have it somewhere here. Anyway, follow-up question on that is that, since you have done so much of fusion music and albums and many other people have, do you think that there is a time now where we need to push the paradigm and go to a new frontier? Are we hitting a saturation of the sounds we are hearing? I don't know, it's just my own impression.
If you call it, let me give you an example of Indian classical music. Does anybody ever hear a saturation in Indian classical music? You don't, because you could hear the sitar 200 years back, you could hear it today, and yet feel, kind of uplifted by it.
True.
So no, I personally do not see a saturation. If you listen to my music, I can only speak for myself. My music, I feel, continuously grows, which is why even as a fusion artist, I've been relevant for over 20 years now. And even today, people want to hear it because I am constantly reinventing. Even in my soundscape, if you listen to a rhythmscape 20 years back, if you listen to last year's Paperboards, you will see there's a humongous growth in the soundscape of what I'm presenting now. And of course, in my tabla playing as well, there is growth, and there is constant looking into the mirror, so to say, as an artist. And I think that is the clincher, so to say. It is not the genre which is ever at fault. You can't say, oh, Indian classical music, nobody's listening to it anymore. No, there's always an audience. You can't say, fusion music has hit a wall. No, the artist may have hit a wall, but fusion music cannot hit a wall. So you can always keep growing within the genre that we are talking about, and yet be experimental, yet be relevant. And I think a lot of that is also coming across nowadays in what I do in my film scoring. In my film scoring, I am taking the same sound of the early 2000s, which I was doing in my fusion music. I'm taking that forward, but on a completely different trajectory. So you can have a Bengali song with a very interesting soundscape, which once, maybe once or twice in the track, you can maybe think, oh, that probably sounded a tad bit like that sound in electroclassical, or that sound in rhythmscape, or that sound in folktale or Tagore Lounge, that you can think. But I think it's with me, I see to it that I constantly grow.
That was just very, very fascinating. बहुत अच्छा लगा. Very nice. I want to move to a contemporary question, which is kind of affecting everyone now. So obviously there's a global pandemic and a lockdown, and pretty much, every industry is getting affected. But
Yes.
the music and the musician world is perhaps affected a bit more. And that is because the way I view it is that, the income that musicians make largely for, not the very famous people like you and others, but a lot of people depend on live shows, gigs, right? And that's completely stopped. So everyone is now moving to online, Facebook and Zoom and all, and they're figuring it out. And what I'm hearing from all my musician friends, that nobody's getting paid, right? And is this going to become a dangerous trend that a lot of artists, even well-known people, are online, not getting paid? Even if they announce a program, hardly few people are showing up. Is that a bad thing that is happening? How do you view this?
Right. So let us think of how did musical performance, let's stick to India for a bit, because otherwise the whole world is a very, very complex platform. In India, how did performance begin? Performance on stage came much, much later with Indian music, Indian classical music, or even folk music. Performance of Indian classical used to be, a lot of it would be in the king's court. Those concerts, I'm pretty sure, were never ticketed. So the artist wasn't selling tickets. The artist was patronized by the king. So that is the kind of zone that art was in, and then it became ticketed, and then it became something that people were getting used to, becoming professional musicians who sold auditoriums out and stuff. This is another frontier. This is the same scenario, in my opinion. And don't for once think it's a bad thing. I keep telling the youngsters this, that it's a very good thing. Why? I have been doing paid shows during the pandemic. Not a great many, but yes, a few. And maybe not as much as what I would get in a live concert, but not an amount which is meager by any means either. I mean, respectable amounts, And the idea that hit me is that this, in time, will actually be an add-on for the musician. It will no longer be just the live show, but it will also be the digital paid concert. We're going through a flux right now. We're going through a churning. And in this, there is this whole thing of, people doing concerts on FB Live, what have you, Very soon, people are going to figure it out, if they haven't already, that they can't be giving their art away for free. The artist is they're already starting to kind of say, no, I'm not going to do this for free. And when that happens, people will have to realize that music is not a luxury. It is a need. Music is something you have to listen, because it does something to your soul. It does something to your life quality. And for that, top-end musicians need to get paid. If they're good, and to keep continuing doing good work, they have to be paid, because otherwise they will stop practicing, they will start doing something else, and they will not be as sincere with their music. So you have to create that ecosystem. And that's going to happen. It's inevitable, because people will pay eventually. It's a phase now, and people are trying to figure it out. And I think technology needs to really upgrade for all the performances to happen really well. It has to be a much better experience for the listener. So I've been trying to do that. I've been doing recordings in my studio, full sound, full lights, produce shows, and that's what people have been paying for. So that is a new experience even for me, and I'm pretty excited with it actually. I think it's fantastic, because there's so much you can do this way, and you can collaborate across oceans. I can get somebody sitting in America to send me a file, which I've been doing, and I've been doing it for several albums and several years now. But now to do it as a video technology, you can get the video with a top-end audio from an artist sitting in America and slap it on with what you're doing here, produce it, and gift the audience something really interesting, which they wouldn't have got, even if they were going to see a live show. So if they're going to see a live show, to get an artist from, say, Italy to Kolkata, or vice versa, from Kolkata to Italy, then there's so much of costs involved and so much, to organize. But today, if you get that artist to play in Italy and send the file, the video and the audio file, to India, I can simply produce it, create a collaboration on top of it. Of course, we'll have to play to a click track, and some technical issues are there, but it can be completely worked out and created into a wholesome experience for the audience. So I think great days lie ahead, and the musicians will just have to, somehow ride over this period, which is very difficult, I guess, for a lot of people. But good days are coming, and I'm sure the pandemic's going to be over soon enough. Human beings are great with science today and with medicine. So soon enough, it's going to be over naturally. And when that happens, artists will have two alternatives: A, to do a live concert; B, to do a digital concert.
Wonderful. I really like the positive, optimistic view there, because
yes, that's what I like to stick with.
Very pessimistic right now. Acha, Bickram, you're moving on. I think you alluded a little bit to this, but I will still ask. I am more from the commercial music side, right? So I'm not classical person or anything. And clearly, when we look at Bollywood music or even our Bengal music, everybody says old is gold. Whatever great work has happened in the past. Music today is destroyed. And I hear this from musicians and composers, even in Bollywood, right? So is it like the new generation is not living up to the standards, or is that not even true? So how do you view this issue? Or why is this happening?
Let me also throw in my bit here. When you introduced me today, you introduced me as a rhythm artist. But I have scored for 36 films. I have over 70 albums of compositional material, which all involve songs and melodies. In fact, Rhythmscape is very popular because of the melodies. So let us understand what's happening here. And I will request you, while we're on the subject, at some point to plug in a particular song or a couple of lines from two songs, which were released in the span of the last month, from a Bengali film called Maya Kumari, which I've scored for, which is a retro film and is set in the era of the 50s and 60s. And it's a musical, and the film has 12 songs. And 85% of the songs are adhering to the melodic style of the 50s, 60s, and 70s. Hear these songs, hear two of them, which are released, a little bit, minute each maybe, and judge for yourself whether you feel that richness of melody or don't.
You know, Panditji also mentioned about melodies, how he has been working with films and how, you know, the golden period of our Bollywood or Tollywood music industry, जिसमें melody was so predominant. So थोड़ा झलक सुनते हैं on his recent film compositions.
মধুমাসে ফুল ফোটে বাগানে কাননে মধুমাসে ভালোবাসা মনের গহনে মধুমাসে ফুল ফোটে বাগানে কাননে মধুমাসে ভালোবাসা মনের গহনে যৌবন গন্ধে মম এই মধুমাসে চঞ্চল হলো তনু তোমারও সুবাসে মধুমাসে অলিকুলো এসে দেখি জোটে লাজবতী লাজ দিল সুবাসিত ঠোঁটে.
And I know because you and I grew up in that era.
Absolutely.
We are not in our 20s, so we grew up on the music of the 60s and 70s, you know, or the 50s even, you know. We were hearing even Talat Mahmood, we were even hearing Muhammad Rafi Saab, you know. So all of that, Sudhin Das Gupta, whoever, you know, Sohail Chaudhary. So it is all there. In my work, I'm very, very particular in my work, especially my film work. I am very particular to create melodies which sustain. And a lot of that people have liked in my last 5 years. I've done a lot of film work. So be it a film like Durgesh Gore Guptadhan, be it a film like Arindam Shi's Durga Shahai, be it a film like Kadamburi, Boshu Porivar, all these films are using melody like it used to be. You know, sometimes kirtan, sometimes classical songs, sometimes adhunik, you know, all of that, but with a very modern soundscape. That's my style of music composition. So if you hear this, you will see that it is still there. Now, coming to your point, don't get me wrong, I'm not throwing your point away at all. I think you are right. There is a lot of difficulty to do the music that I'm doing. And one of the reasons that I stopped scoring for cinema. See, early 2000s, I was already scoring for films. I did Iti Srikanto, I did Hatat Nirajono, I did a whole bunch of films actually in that era. Then I stopped doing film music. I realized that the demand for melody was abysmally going down. The demand. I was hearing things like, sir, विक्रम जी आप तो रिदम के राजा हैं, आप कुछ बीट डालिए, थोड़ा सा मेलोडी कम कर दीजिए. I've heard this. So having heard these comments, I thought I should step out of the film arena because I can't be doing things that I don't believe in. And in my career, I've pretty much stuck with that. I've gone with it. Even today, I don't think I try not to do work that I don't believe in. And if there is a bit of a compromise, then I wouldn't stretch it beyond 10 to 15% of compromise. After a point, Bickram Ghosh will not do it. So that is the problem. There suddenly there was this thought in the production houses, even in the audience, or even the youth began to think that what they wanted was more rhythm oriented and not melody oriented. And it was not entirely true, because I think melody does something to you. It does something to you. It makes you a certain kind of person also. And I think it's suddenly, I see the need for melody coming back again. And I think, you know, so I'm lucky because what I want to do, I'm able to jump onto the last bus or the last coach of the bandwagon, you know, that now suddenly, before I become too old to do it, suddenly people are saying, "Nahi, you know, we want melody, sir. Bikram da, aap jaisa melody mujhe hum log ko chahiye," you know. So that is happening, and I think it's a strange cycle, and somehow people who dictate what should happen are dictating according to the previous trends of success. And success is a very weird thing, you know. Either we give people what has worked in the past, or we also give people a large chunk of what we artists believe people should be hearing, you know. And somehow that percolation doesn't happen because there are people in between who tend to think they know better than us. And once that happens, then you are not given the opportunity to score the way you want to score. And I think in that era, because melody was so big, everybody was asking for better melody, better melody. SD Burman, oh, okay, give us Sholi Chaudhary, okay, give us RD Burman. Yeah. So the competition was one of melody. And in our era, suddenly I arrived on the scene and was very disappointed to see that, you know, people were not giving melody its status. They were saying, no, sir, acha ek beat dal dijiye. You know, people need to dance. As if every time people need to dance. Why should they dance all the time? They can also sit in a dimly lit room and listen to a melody and take this trip down memory lane or trip into the future. I mean, I think this is changing, thankfully, now. It is there, we can do it, you know, but we have to be given the opportunity to do it.
Very good. Okay, so Bickramji, now we come to a fun part. Okay, so this is a rapid fire where I'm going to throw some bunch of questions. Each has two choices. You pick the first choice that you like. And I think some of it will be very easy and some of it may be a little difficult. The first one.
Right.
Ready? Okay.
Ready.
Luchir aloo dum or mutton biryani?
Right now it's mutton biryani, but the face changes.
Okay. New York or Paris?
Paris.
Okay. Shankar Mahadevan or Sonu Nigam?
Sonu Nigam.
Okay. I guessed that. Suchitra Sen or Sharmila Tagore?
I would go with Sharmila Tagore.
Okay. This may be a little tough. R.D. Burman or Sholil Chaudhary?
R.D. Burman.
Okay.
Not tough. I have to give you I have to qualify why it's not tough, because in Panchamda's work, see, I'm a huge fan of Sholil Chaudhary, but in Panchamda's work, I find an affinity because there are all these rhythmic components which are there, and the kind of experimentation with rhythm that was happening, I have an affinity with that. So personally, that's why I said R.D. Burman.
Absolutely. Acha, let's see how you go with this one. Hot gossip or salacious rumors?
Well, hot gossip is kind of fun.
Okay.
But I don't really indulge in much of it, but yeah, on the odd day, I guess.
Okay. This is probably easy. Zakir Hussain or Ranjit Barrett?
Zakir Hussain.
Bhapa Ilish or Chingri Malai Curry?
Okay. Bhapa Ilish.
All right. And this is the last one. Arranged marriage or love marriage?
Love.
Wonderful. Okay, so we are pretty much wrapping up to the end of this interview. You know,
Right.
I would like to hear from you some words of wisdom and parting words to all the musicians out there, right? We are living in incredible times. We are all optimistic. Things will get better. Things will get normal. But there is a struggle ahead. So what do you have to say as we close this interview?
The one thing that I've learned in life is that no scenario in life is without opportunity. It depends on what you think opportunity is. So if you use a lockdown to up your game, then it's fantastic, because we lead lives which are so busy and there's no time, and we keep complaining there's no time to practice, there's no time to hone our skills, you know, we're running from pillar to post all the time. Well, this is it. I mean, I have found that I have been more connected with my instrument during the lockdown. I have been composing more. I've been doing a lot of videos, being creative, understanding new technology, learning it, reading, watching relevant films. So I think one is always working on oneself all the time. And if you use this period to do that, and somehow you cross that bridge, and once the pandemic is over, and then you are a better artist, hopefully a better human being, and more equipped to handle what's about to come. So I think people really need to look at that and think positively, one day at a time, and try to put their head and heart into their own music. And this specifically for musicians, and for others also. If you're doing something else, then put your head and heart into it, learn your skills better, hone those skills better, and be positive. I mean, it's going to be over, and at some point, you're going to have to come back to what you were doing. And if you come back with an added, skill set, then you're going to do even better. So, yeah.
That is wonderful. So, Bickramji, thank you so much for coming to our show. We had an excellent conversation. I really enjoyed it. And be safe, and I hope your family remains safe, and we'll soon meet again.
Thank you. And it was wonderful talking to you as well. You asked very, very relevant questions, and which I found interesting to answer. So thank you for having me on your show, and all the best to you, your family, and all your listeners and all those who view this program. Be safe. God bless.